If you're hearing this right now, it's not random, it's not luck, it's not coincidence, it's timing, real timing. Because the hardest part was never the applause, the money, the recognition, or the win. The hardest part was the silent grind when nobody believed you. The hardest part was waking up tired but still moving forward. The hardest part was carrying vision with empty pockets, hope with heavy doubt, and discipline without guarantees. And the truth is this, you didn't quit, you adjusted, you learned, you stayed in it. That's why you're here. You seeing this because you passed the hardest part. Now let's talk about what that really means. There's a part of the journey nobody claps for. No cameras, no confirmation, no signs telling you you're doing it right. Just long days that blur together and nights where your thoughts are louder than your surroundings. You wake up early, move with purpose, do what you said you'd do, and still nothing seems to change on the outside. The work goes in, but the results don't show up. The scoreboard stays stuck. Bills still show up on time, even when the progress doesn't. People start asking questions you don't have clean answers for. Family worries, friends doubt, strangers judge. And even you, at times, look in the mirror and wonder if you misread the signs. That phase is dangerous, not because the work is too hard, but because the meaning gets cloudy. Confusion drains you in a way failure never could. When you fail clearly, at least you know where you stand. But when nothing fails and nothing works, your mind starts playing tricks on you. You start questioning the vision, not because it's wrong, but because it's quiet. That's where most people fold, not from lack of talent or heart, but from not knowing if the road they're on actually leads somewhere. You can be disciplined and still feel lost. You can be consistent and still feel behind. That's the part nobody prepares you for. Society celebrates the highlight reel but skips the years of preparation where the highlight doesn't exist yet. The truth is, most people don't quit when things go bad. They quit when things stay the same for too long. When effort doesn't echo back. When sacrifice feels invisible. Look at real stories, not the polished versions, but the raw timelines. Businesses we call overnight successes were years in the making. Amazon lost money year after year while critics laughed at the idea of selling books on the internet. Not because the idea was weak, but because the market hadn't caught up yet. The vision was ahead of the moment. Athletes you admire trained in empty gyms, ran drills nobody filmed, lost games nobody remembers before. One moment shifted how the world. That long stretch where nothing made sense was the price of entry. You were in that stretch, waking up and choosing belief without proof, choosing consistency without applause, choosing patience while everything around you pushed urgency. That takes something deeper than motivation. Motivation fades when results don't show. What kept you moving was endurance. A quiet kind of faith, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. Some days you didn't even feel inspired, you just felt responsible. Responsible to the future version of yourself that would benefit if you didn't quit today. Responsible to the time you already invested. Responsible to the idea that maybe this confusion wasn't punishment but preparation. You learned how to operate without certainty, how to keep your head down when the noise got loud, how to move even when doubt tried to slow your steps. At some point, something shifted inside you, not externally. Internally, you stopped asking why everything felt so hard and started asking what it was shaping you into. You stopped taking the struggle as a personal attack and started seeing it as training. That's a mental upgrade most people never reach because it requires humility. It requires admitting you don't know everything yet, but trusting that you're learning what you need. When effort and results don't align and force you to sharpen your awareness, you start paying attention to your habits, your patterns, your reactions. You realize where you've been wasting energy. You learn the difference between motion and progress. You stop chasing validation and start building structure. That's growth happening under the surface. And here's the part that matters most. Surviving that phase builds a kind of confidence that success alone can't give you because it's not based on wins. It's based on proof that you don't collapse under uncertainty. You've already faced the worst version of the journey, the one where nothing makes sense, and you didn't abandon yourself. That means something. A lot of people look successful but panic when clarity disappears. You already know how to function in the fog. You already know how to keep going when the map isn't clear. That's a rare skill. That's leadership. That's the kind of mindset that lasts when trends fade and circumstances change. You didn't need all the answers to make it through. You needed stamina. You needed patience. You needed to trust that the work was doing something even if you couldn't see it yet. Just like seeds growing underground, the real change was happening out of sight. Roots forming, strength developing, stability being built. And now, whether you realize it fully or not, you're different. You're not as easily shaken. You don't chase quick wins the same way. You move more deliberately. You think longer term. You understand that confusion doesn't mean you're off track. Sometimes it means you're early. That phase tried to humble you, isolate you, and test your commitment. And instead of breaking, you adapted. You learned how to carry vision quietly, how to move without reassurance, how to trust yourself when no one else could see the outcome yet. That's why you're still here, not because it was easy, but because you refused to let uncertainty decide your future. You stayed when leaving would have been understandable. You kept building when stopping would have been justified. And that endurance changed you. The hardest part was never the work. It was surviving the period where the work didn't explain itself. And you survived it. That alone puts you in a different category. Motivation makes noise. It talks big. It shows up when the lights are on, when people are watching, when progress feels exciting. Motivation feeds off emotion. When you feel good, it feels strong. When things slow down, it disappears without warning. Discipline doesn't announce itself like that. Discipline moves quietly. It doesn't care how you feel when you wake up. It doesn't negotiate with comfort. It just asks one question every day. Did you do the work or not? The real grind of the journey is learning how to move without emotional fuel. Learning how to get up on days when there's no excitement waiting for you. Days when nothing new is happening, nothing is changing, and nothing is rewarding you yet. That's where discipline is built. Not in the big moments, but in the boring ones. In repetition, in routine, in showing up when skipping would be easy and justified. You trained yourself to work without praise. That's not common. Most people need feedback to keep going. They need someone to notice, someone to clap, someone to confirm they're on the right path. You didn't always get that. Sometimes you got silence. Sometimes you got doubt. Sometimes you got people questioning why you were still pushing when the results weren't obvious. And instead of folding, you kept going. You stayed consistent without validation. You learned how to approve of yourself, how to let your own standards be enough. That changes a person, because once you stop depending on outside approval, you become harder to control, harder to discourage, harder to stop. You weren't chasing applause anymore, you were chasing progress. You improved without celebration, no announcements, no milestones people cared about, just small, quiet upgrades, getting a little sharper, a little more efficient, a little more focused. That kind of growth doesn't look impressive at first, but it compounds. That's how real momentum is built. Most people wait for proof before they commit. They want guarantees. They want to see results before they give effort. You flipped that. You committed first. You decided the work was worth it before the outcome was clear. That's ownership. That's belief that doesn't depend on circumstances. Across every high-performing field, the pattern is the same. The people who last aren't always the most gifted. They're the most consistent. Research on skill building shows deliberate practice over time beats raw talent almost every time. Athletes who train methodically outperform naturally gifted ones who rely on bursts of motivation. Artists who create daily improve faster than those who wait for inspiration. Business leaders who focus on systems outperform those who chase quick wins. You didn't just work hard. You built systems, routines, standards. You learned how to reduce excuses and increase output. You learned how to protect your energy, how to structure your days so progress became automatic, not emotional. That's next level discipline. You showed up tired. That's important, because anyone can show up when they're rested. Anyone can grind when they're excited. But showing up tired means you learn how to move without perfect conditions. You learn how to operate when your body says slow down, but your vision said keep going. That builds a different type of strength. You carried pressure quietly, pressure from expectations, pressure from time, pressure from knowing you couldn't afford to waste days. Instead of complaining about the weight, you adjusted your posture and carried it. That's maturity. That's growth. Every rep you put in when nobody was watching added weight to your mental strength. Every day you stayed consistent without results made you sharper, more durable, more reliable. You were training under heavier conditions than most people ever will. So when opportunities start to show up, when the spotlight finally turns your way, you won't panic, you won't rush, you won't fumble. Because the environment is easier than what you trained in. A lot of people fall apart when success arrives because they didn't build discipline first. They relied on excitement. They relied on hype. When pressure increased, their habits collapsed. You built the opposite. You build structure before success. That means when success arrives, it fits into your system instead of disrupting it. You learn how to keep promises to yourself. It's underrated. Every time you said you'd do something and followed through, even when it was inconvenient, you strengthened trust with yourself. And self-trust is the foundation of confidence. Not loud confidence, quiet confidence. The kind that doesn't need to prove anything. There were days you questioned if it was worth it. Days you felt like you were putting in too much for too little return. But you kept your head down. You reminded yourself that discipline doesn't pay instantly, it pays eventually. And when it pays consistently. You weren't chasing motivation anymore, you were building identity. You became the type of person who does the work regardless of mood. The type of person who doesn't need perfect circumstances to perform. The type of person who understands that greatness is built on habits, not hype. That's why when people look at you later and say it was luck or timing or overnight success, they won't see the years you spent mastering discipline in silence. They won't see the mornings you showed up exhausted, the nights you stayed focused instead of distracted, the choices you made when nobody was enforcing them. But you'll know, and that's enough. You didn't wait to feel ready. You trained yourself ready. You didn't wait for success to change you. You changed first. And now, when doors open, when pressure increases, when expectations rise, you won't have to adjust who you are. You already built the foundation. Discipline carried you when motivation couldn't. And that's why you prepare for what's coming next. Growth doesn't always look like adding more. Sometimes it looks like subtraction. And that's the part nobody warns you about. When you start evolving, the same rooms that once felt familiar begin to feel tight. Conversations you used to enjoy start sounding repetitive. Habits that once felt normal start feeling heavy. Not because anything is wrong with them, but because something changed in you. Your vision expanded, and the environment didn't stretch with it. That distance hurts at first, because it's not dramatic, it's subtle. You don't wake up one day deciding to leave everything behind. You just start noticing that you're not aligned anymore. You sit in the same places, but your mind is somewhere else. You hear the same jokes, the same complaints, the same excuses, and they don't land the same. You still care, but you can't pretend anymore. And pretend is expensive. You had to separate from old habits, not all at once, sometimes slowly, sometimes painfully. The late nights that drained your mornings, the routines that killed your focus, the comfort behaviors that kept you entertained but not fulfilled. Letting those go felt like losing part of your identity, because for a long time, that's who you were. But you understood something important. Where you were going couldn't be built on the same patterns that kept you stuck. You also had to separate from old conversations. That part is tricky, because words shape direction. When every conversation circles around limitation, fear, or settling, it starts to normalize staying the same. You realize that being around constant negativity, even subtle, was slowing your momentum. Not because those people were bad, but because their priorities didn't match the future you were building. And sometimes the hardest part was separating from people. Not in anger, not with disrespect, just with distance. That's heavy, because history creates loyalty. Shared struggles create bonds, but growth demands honesty. And the truth was, some relationships were anchored to the old version of you. The one who needed company more than clarity, the one who valued belonging over direction. That phase is lonely. There's no way around it. You're not fully connected to the old world anymore, but you're not welcome into the new one yet. You're in between. Too evolved to go back, too early to arrive. That's where most people panic. Because loneliness feels like failure if you don't understand the process. Belonging feels safer than becoming. Being accepted feels easier than being misunderstood. So a lot of people shrink themselves back to fit. They mute their ambition. They slow their growth. They return to familiar spaces just to feel connected again. You felt that pull too. That urge to go back to what was comfortable, even if it was limiting. But you didn't retreat, you stayed with the discomfort. You accepted the quiet, you chose purpose over comfort. You chose the long-term vision over short-term validation. That decision cost you company, but it gave you clarity. High performers talk about isolation not because they enjoy being alone, but because focus requires space. You can't build something big while constantly being pulled into small thinking. You can't elevate while staying surrounded by habits that keep you grounded in the past. Space gives you room to think, to plan, to hear your own thoughts without interference. That isolation sharpened you. Without constant input, you learn to trust your own judgment. You learn to sit with your ideas long enough to develop them. You learn how to move without announcing every step. Silence became productive instead of scary. You started noticing how much energy you used to spend explaining yourself, defending your choices, justifying your ambition. When that noise faded, your focus got stronger. Your moves got more intentional. You stopped looking for permission to grow. You didn't lose people. You outgrew the version of yourself that needed constant reassurance, that needed approval to feel secure, that needed familiar faces to feel valid. Growth changed your requirements. Some people couldn't come with you because they weren't meant to, not because they lacked value, but because they belonged to a chapter that already served its purpose, and you learn how to honor that without guilt. There's maturity in understanding that not everyone is supposed to walk every stage with you. Some people help you survive. Others help you build. Others help you sustain. You were transitioning into a phase that required different energy, different conversations, different standards. The isolation didn't make you cold, it made you clear. It taught you how to enjoy your own company, how to work without distractions, how to value alignment over attachment. You stopped measuring your progress by how many people were around you and started measuring it by how focused you felt, how disciplined your days became, how much closer you were getting to the life you envisioned. And in that quiet space, something powerful happened. Your identity solidified. Without constant outside influence, you became more intentional about who you were becoming. You weren't reacting anymore. You were designing. That's why when new environments start opening up, when new circles begin to appear, you'll recognize them. Because they won't require you to shrink. They won't require you to explain. They'll match the frequency you already developed in solitude. The distance you experienced wasn't rejection. It was alignment. It was preparation. It was the cost of upgrading your life. You didn't abandon your past. You honored it by not letting it limit your future. In the beginning, pain hits different. It feels personal, like the universe is singling you out. Rejection doesn't feel like feedback. It feels like disrespect. Loss doesn't feel like a lesson. It feels like punishment. You take every setback to the chest because you're still emotionally invested in being understood, accepted, and validated. When something goes wrong, you don't just feel the impact of the event. You feel the weight of what it says about you. At least that's how it feels at first. When doors closed early on, it wasn't easy to separate the moment from your identity. A missed opportunity felt like a verdict. A failed attempt felt like proof that you weren't ready or worthy yet. You replayed conversations in your head, wondering what you could have said differently, what you should have done better. That kind of pain sits with you. It follows you home. It keeps you up at night. And if you're not careful, it convinces you to move smaller, quieter, safer. But something changed along the way. Not all at once, slowly, subtly. After being hit enough times, you stopped reacting emotionally and started observing intellectually. You stopped asking why it hurt and started asking why it happened. That's a powerful shift. Because when pain stops being personal, it becomes useful. Started taking notes instead of taking it to heart. You began breaking moments down, looking at patterns, seeing where things went wrong without attaching shame to it. You realized pain wasn't there to embarrass you. It was there to inform you, to show you gaps in your preparation, flaws in your execution, weaknesses in your strategy. Every setback started teaching you structure. You learned that effort without direction wastes energy, that being busy isn't the same as being effective, that timing matters just as much as intensity. Losses showed you where your systems were weak, where your boundaries weren't clear, where your expectations didn't match reality. Every mistake sharpened your awareness. You started seeing situations coming before they fully arrived. You recognized red flags earlier. You noticed when something felt off and trusted that instinct instead of ignoring it. That awareness saved you time, money, and emotional energy later on. That's when pain stopped being a wound and became information. Clean data, honest feedback, the kind you don't get when everything is going right. Wins feel good, but they don't always teach you much. Loss forces reflection. Pain demands attention, and you learn how to listen. Athletes watch game film for a reason, not to relive the loss, but to understand it. They slow it down frame by frame. They study positioning, timing, decision-making. Business owners do the same when a venture fails. They analyze numbers, market fit, execution. Leaders reflect instead of react. They ask what the moment revealed, not who to blame. You learn how to apply that mindset to your own life. Instead of spiraling after a setback, you started breaking it down. What was in your control, what wasn't, where you overextended, where you underprepared, where you trusted too easily or hesitated too long. That level of self-honesty isn't easy. It requires humility, but it builds precision. You became strategic with your energy. You stopped pouring effort into situations that didn't align with your long-term vision. You learned when to push and when to pull back, when to speak and when to observe, when to invest and when to walk away. Pain taught you that energy is currency and you can't afford to waste it. You became strategic with your time. You stopped reacting to everything. You stopped letting emergencies that weren't yours dictate your schedule. You realized that time lost to unnecessary drama or distraction never comes back. Pain showed you the cost of being too available, too open, too reactive. You became strategic with your moves. You stopped announcing plans before they were solid. You stopped rushing decisions just to feel progress. You started stacking moves that built on each other. Intentional steps, long-term positioning. You learned that silence can be a strategy too. That's growth, not the loud kind. The internal kind, the kind that doesn't look impressive until you realize how calm you've become under pressure. Situations that once overwhelmed you now feel familiar. Obstacles that used to knock you off course barely slow you down. Not because life got easier, but because you got sharper. You don't panic the same way anymore. You don't react from ego. You don't collapse when things don't go as planned. You assess, you adjust, you move forward. Pain trained you to think, not flinch. There was a time when one rejection could ruin your momentum. One loss could shake your confidence. Now you treat those moments like checkpoints. Information collected, lesson logged, adjustment made, forward motion continues. That's wisdom earned the hard way, not from books or advice, but from lived experience, from being hurt, disappointed, and challenged enough times to realize that pain isn't the enemy, ignoring it is. You didn't just survive setbacks, you studied them. You didn't just endure loss, you extracted value from it. And that's why the same obstacles that once broke you now barely register. You're not tougher because you harden your heart. You're tougher because you sharpen your mind. There's a moment in every long journey where the narrative has to change. Not because the struggle disappears, but because your position does. A lot of people think making it past the hardest part means everything suddenly